Hi everyone, my name is Mike Soskel. I am a STEM teacher, elementary STEM teacher in northeastern Pennsylvania in the United States. This lesson, however, is not going to be about any STEM content. It's not going to be a science lesson. It's not going to be a mathematics lesson. This is going to be a lesson about empowerment because I know a lot of us right now are in our homes, we're isolated from others, and we're feeling a little bit powerless. We feel like the world is falling apart around us and there's not much that we can do. And so, whether you're a student or a teacher, I'm hoping that this short lesson can give you some ideas about how you can find your power, how you can find your agency and ability to make a difference in your community, even with the restrictions that we have right now. So I normally teach fourth and fifth graders. My fourth and fifth grade students have done some amazing work. They've used the design process and design thinking, just what I'm going to share with you today, to do everything from bettering their own local community and solving problems here. In our small little town, northeastern Pennsylvania, our village has maybe 2,000 people or so, a little small town in a rural area. But they've also used this same process to solve global problems like providing clean water to children in schools in the Kibera slum of Nairobi, designing and building bridges in rural parts of Kenya up by the Ugandan border, working with students in Uganda to develop hydroponics units that use less water because of drought and climate change. And so this same process can be used to solve any kind of problem, regardless of what that problem is. So I'm going to share with you the design process, and we're going to talk through some different steps. And remember, this can be adapted to anything. So if you're right now in a math class, you can use the mathematics that you're learning within this process to try and make a difference. If you're teaching or learning English language arts or whatever your topic is, this is going to be applicable to you. So let's do a brief introduction to design thinking and the design process. What you're looking at right now on the screen is the engineering design process. This is not just for engineers. This is the process that all of us use to solve problems in life, in our communities, in the world. This is a problem-solving strategy. And you may see some different diagrams that have different steps in there, but this is really the simplest version that I can share with you. It's boiled down to just its most basic elements. And you'll see there are 5 different steps here. So I'm going to go through them briefly, and then we're going to talk about each step a little more in depth so that you understand where your ability to make a difference is and how you can use this to make your community better. So the first step is to find out what the problem is. Once you've identified that problem, right, so there's step number 1. Step number 2, we're going to brainstorm and figure out lots of different possible solutions. In this step, we're not trying to figure out which solution is best. We're just dumping all of our thoughts and all of our research down, and then we're going to kind of play with that and see what we can do. Next, we're going to plan. We're going to come up with a plan for how we can solve this problem. We're going to put it into action, and then inevitably, our plan is going to fail. That's okay. We know that mistakes are a part of life. We know that our first attempt to solve problems is rarely the perfect solution. But what we want to do here is learn from that failure, and then make things better so that we can keep improving. Right, and this is, you may have heard teachers talk before, or people in other spaces say, as long as you keep trying, that's good, or, failure should be a learning opportunity. Well, the engineering design process is built on that. You are not going to get things right the first time, probably. You should assume that you're going to make mistakes. Mistakes are learning opportunities, so keep that in mind as we go forward. So your first step is to figure out what is the problem that you're trying to solve. Now, right now, we're living through a time where there are lots of problems in our community. We see everything from loneliness as people are isolated, to problems of supply issues where people can't get items that they need, to problems where older members of our community may not be able to leave their house to go get supplies because they're in a high-risk group. Wherever we look, we can see lots of different problems, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. So let me just start by telling you, it is okay. You do not have to solve all of those problems. Your job is not to solve all of the supply issues in your community. There are government agencies that are working on that. That is for other people to do. But that doesn't mean that you don't have power yourself. You can solve smaller problems. So one of the things that you need to think about is, where is your leverage? What is it that you have? What are your innate talents? What are your abilities? What are your resources that you have that can help make a difference for others? So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing that you need to keep in mind is that as you're thinking about problems that you want to get involved in solving, it's important that if you're helping someone, you understand their lived experience. It's very easy for us to assume sometimes that we know what's best for others, and that leads to unintended consequences. And so it's really important that if you're trying to help someone, that you reach out and you understand them, that you try and find some empathy to be able to put yourself in their shoes and understand what they're going through. So a good example of this might be, let's say you have an elderly neighbor, and you assume that because they're elderly, and they shouldn't be leaving the house right now because maybe they're in a high risk group, and there's a COVID-19 outbreak in your area, that the most important thing that they need must be someone to bring them groceries, right? So you've made that assumption, and let's say you call them up and you say, I would like to bring you some groceries so you don't have to go grocery shopping. They may say yes, because that's a very nice gesture that you're reaching out and offering, and they don't want to tell you that there's other things they need. But perhaps there's a delivery service that's already bringing them groceries. It's not the most pressing thing. Maybe, they have a son who's younger who usually comes over and mows their lawn, but is now social distancing and staying away from them because he's afraid of infecting them. And so they don't have any way to mow their lawn right now. And what they really need is for you to take your lawnmower next door and to mow their lawn for them. Without you asking the question, what do you need? And by making an assumption, you may never get to that problem. Now, that's a really simplistic kind of version of how you need to reach out and understand lived experience. But the point is, it's important that you ask. It's important that you don't assume. So when you're thinking about what problem you may want to get involved in solving, list a bunch of different problems that you see in your community that might intersect with the talent that you have. Maybe you're an artist. Maybe you write really well. Maybe you're a musician. Maybe you just are really passionate about something. Maybe you're good at gardening. Whatever it happens to be, look at what your talents are, what your passions are, and how they intersect with some of those problems. And that'll help you as we move through the next couple of steps. Once you've identified the problem that you want to get involved in solving, the next step is to think of possible solutions. So part of this is brainstorming. You want to throw all of the ideas that you have down on paper. It doesn't matter if they're good ideas or bad ideas, just write them down. Get a list of all of those different ideas, because it may be that some of those crazy ideas, when put together, can actually work. The other thing that you want to do during this second step is you want to research. Look online, find out what resources are available, find out how other people may have solved this problem. Do as much learning as you can to learn about the problem. This could mean learning about your community, things that you don't know. It could be learning about how other communities have solved this problem, or it could be doing some scientific research, depending on what you're trying to solve. So if you're looking at providing more surgical masks for hospitals, and looking at maybe sewing those masks and seeing what you need, it's time to dive into some scientific research to figure out what is the best cloth to be using. Where can you get your hands on the right materials? So depending on the topic, on the problem that you've chosen, this research is going to look a little bit differently. But don't shortchange this step. I know especially younger students, I told you I deal with 4th and 5th graders, they want to jump right into the next step and start planning and start doing. The research and brainstorming phase is really important. This is where you find ideas that you may not have known that you had. And it's very possible that one crazy idea that, on the surface may look like it would never work, when attached to some of that other research that you do, may be the perfect solution. So now's the time to get all of those different ideas down on paper. In the planning phase, you're going to take that research that you did and those brainstormed ideas, and you're going to look at them critically and think to yourself, I know the experiences of the people I'm trying to help. I know what they need. What is the best way to make it happen using the different ideas that I have? And so now we need to talk about constraints. So constraints are a fancy way of saying, like, what are my limitations? And when you plan, you're going to have to think about that, right? If we had $1 billion and no social distancing problems, we could solve a whole lot of problems in our community. But we don't have that. We have limited resources, and we have limited time, and we have certain restrictions that are in place, like stores may not be open, or you may not be able to go places at certain times, or go places at all. You may be, forced to try and solve some problems from your house. So now is the time to look at those different ideas that you had, look at the lived experiences and the needs of the person or people you're trying to help, and put those together in some kind of plan. And this plan does need to be written down. So it should be step by step. Drawing a diagram sometimes helps, looking at how different parts intersect. The more complex the problem, the more detailed that diagram may need to be. But it also could just be a list of steps that you're going to take to try and solve this problem. Remember, do the best you can. Try and think of everything in this phase, but it may not work perfectly, and that's okay, because we're going to come back and revise it if it doesn't work. Solving problems often takes many different iterations. It often takes trying things a couple of different times. One of the reasons why your plan needs to be very detailed is because when it does go wrong, or if parts of it go wrong, you want to be able to look back into that list of steps or into that diagram and identify exactly what needs to change. If you just try something without writing all of this down, then it becomes very difficult to identify where you went wrong and what you need to change. So make sure you list everything in this step. Okay, we've come to the easiest step, or at least the one that is easiest to understand. You've got this plan, now do it. Put it into action. You've got your list of steps, go ahead and follow them. The only thing that may not be obvious that I should probably tell you during this step is make sure you document. So as you're doing these different steps, as you're putting them into action, write down either some quantitative data, that's numbers, right? Measure whether or not you've been successful. Or if that's not possible because of the problem you're trying to solve, write down some qualitative data. So how do the people that you're helping, how do they feel? What is the feedback that they're giving you? How has it been like? But make sure you're keeping data, because you're going to need that to go back to as you look at ways to improve later on. So after you've put your plan in place, it may be obvious that you've failed or succeeded, or somewhat succeeded, and that's okay. But you still need to be very critical. And this is a time to put your ego aside, right? You're going to want to feel like you've done something good, and you probably have. But in this stage, we need to really be self-critical and evaluate. So we want to look and say, okay, number one, did we solve the problem? And in order to be able to answer that, we have to, again, go back to the people we were trying to help. We need to ask them directly. So if it's your next door neighbor, you need to call them up and say, okay, are you satisfied? Do you have what you need? Do you feel like the problem we're trying to solve, you won't put it in those words, but, do you feel, happy and satisfied that we've solved your problem? And they may say yes, or they may say, well, kind of, but I still need this, or I still need that. Whatever it happens to be, this is your time to write down those things, and to then we're going to go through that process again to see if we can make it better. The other thing that you want to do is look at that data that you collected. So maybe you ended up with a good result, but maybe the process can be streamlined or made a little bit more efficient. So you want to go back and look at that data. You also want to look at unintended consequences. So maybe the person or people that you were trying to help, maybe their problem is solved, but did you create other problems along the way? That sometimes happens, right? So maybe by solving your neighbor's problem, you ended up having to go to the gas station, and you came in contact with others, and you should have been social distancing. Off the top of my head, that's just the first example I can come up with. But you need to look at all of the different people that were impacted by the problem-solving process that you put into place, and look and say, were any of them negatively impacted by what I did? And this is all going to be very important, because once you get through this step number 5, we're going to go through that process again. And the problem may not be the same problem, right? So when we think about the first step that we did was identify the problem. So maybe we solved that first problem for the most part, but maybe there's new problems that arose. So now we take those, and they become the new problem that we're trying to solve. And we go and we figure out the lived experiences of who we're trying to help, and we brainstorm and we come up with a plan, and we go through it again to try and make this better and better until we've gotten to the point where there are no unintended consequences, where the process is as streamlined as possible and uses the fewest amount of resources. It's within our constraints, and we've made our community and the world just a little bit better. So this was not a comprehensive look at the design process. You're not going to be an expert at design thinking after watching it. But what I hope that I provided you is a little bit of structure to understand that you are not powerless. That even if you are stuck in your home right now and you are dealing with our world being upended and changed drastically in the last couple of weeks, it seems like every day is a year right now. Time is moving incredibly slowly, and things are just changing by the minute. But you have a role to play in making your community and the world better. Every one of us can do it regardless of what the constraints are. Every one of us has power, and I want you to believe that, and I want you to have some structure to be able to use that power to make an impact and to help others. Because what I know from personal experience, from myself and from seeing my students, is that if we do good for others, if we help others using our passions and our talents, we understand our purpose. We know how good it feels. It feels good to us. We're able to do good for others, and everyone ends up just a little bit better off. And right now, the world needs to be just a little bit better off. And so for each of you, I hope that you stay safe. I hope that you stay healthy. And I hope that you feel like you have the ability to make a difference in this world and in your community and to help others. So thanks for watching. See you again soon.